The soft hum of the city below my apartment never failed to calm me, but tonight it felt different, like the quiet before a storm. I adjusted my silk blouse in the reflection of the floor-to-ceiling window, smoothing out the wrinkles I hadn't noticed before. The invitation to my college reunion had arrived 2 weeks ago, and I'd put off opening it until now, knowing full well what it represented. Ghosts I'd carefully tucked away. My phone buzzed on the marble counter, pulling me from my thoughts. A text from an unknown number. "Are you ready to face them?" I froze, my heart thudding against my ribs. Could they know? I thought I had left that part of my life buried, where I was underestimated, dismissed, even laughed at behind closed doors. I sipped my coffee, the bitter warmth grounding me as memories swirled. Shame, fear, the sneers that had once cut deeper than any blade. And yet, beneath it all, there was pride. The pride of a woman who had clawed her way to a life she had built entirely on her own terms, quietly, without anyone noticing. The city lights reflected off my apartment walls, painting golden streaks across the hardwood floors. I ran my fingers over the keys of my laptop, thinking about the emails I'd sent earlier, the deals I'd closed, the empire I'd grown while everyone assumed I was just invisible. Tonight would be the night I decided whether to step back into that old world or show them exactly who I had become. And maybe, just maybe, leave them gasping in disbelief. I can still remember that night like it was yesterday, even though it happened years ago. The cramped auditorium smelled faintly of old wood and popcorn, and the chatter of my classmates seemed louder than life itself. I had been 17, fresh out of high school, full of dreams that no one seemed to take seriously. My parents had always believed I was too soft for the real world, and my classmates, well, they thought I was an easy target. It started during a group project, one I had poured my heart into. I had stayed up late, my hands cramped from writing, my eyes stinging from lack of sleep, and presented what I thought was a flawless plan. When I spoke, trying to share my ideas, the room fell silent for a moment before laughter erupted. It wasn't her idea anyway, someone sneered, tossing my efforts aside like they were worthless. I felt my stomach drop, my throat tight, and my hands shake. I wanted to disappear, to sink into the floor and never rise. Later, I sat alone on the bleachers, clutching a small leather notebook my grandmother had given me. "Remember," she had said, pressing it into my hands, "your voice matters, even if no one listens right now. One day, you'll show them. But you must first believe it yourself." The notebook smelled of her perfume and worn leather, comforting me in a way nothing else could. I traced the embossed letters with my fingers, feeling a spark of something I hadn't felt before: resolve. That night, I made a silent promise. I would not stay small. I would not let the laughter, the sneers, or the doubt define me. I would work, learn, grow, and succeed, but on my own terms, in a way that no one could ignore. I began sketching plans, jotting ideas, and dreaming of a life far away from the judgmental stares and whispered criticisms. Every rejection, every "it wasn't her" comment, became fuel, a fire I carried quietly in my chest. By the time I walked home that night, the city lights flickering in puddles from a passing rain, I felt a small, stubborn hope taking root. One day, they would see me, not the girl they mocked, but the woman I was destined to become. And when that day came, it would not just be about proving them wrong. It would be about reclaiming the pride and dignity they had tried to take from me. After that night on the bleachers, everything changed, quietly, deliberately. I moved across the country for college, choosing a city where no one knew my name or my history. It was liberating and terrifying at the same time. I rented a tiny studio apartment, just enough for a bed, a desk, and my grandmother's leather notebook. Every morning, I reminded myself of her words, "Your voice matters." They became the rhythm of my days, guiding me through long hours of lectures, internships, and endless side projects. I met Professor Daniels in my sophomore year, a brilliant woman with sharp eyes and sharper intuition. She noticed me lingering after class, scribbling in my notebook, hesitant to speak up. "You have ideas," she said one day, leaning on the edge of the podium. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. But ideas alone aren't enough. You need action. Her mentorship became a lifeline. She challenged me, demanded perfection, and believed in me even when I doubted myself. There were nights I cried at my desk, the city lights outside my window blurred through tears, as I struggled to understand coding languages, marketing strategies, and business models. I failed more times than I could count, emails unanswered, internships lost, opportunities slipping through my fingers, but I persisted. Small victories kept me moving. My first freelance client, a project that earned enough to pay rent, an invitation to speak at a minor conference. Each success was tiny, but it was mine. I learned to hide my progress from my family. Occasional calls home became carefully scripted conversations, full of modest updates, half-truths, and avoidance. They would never expect that the girl they doubted was quietly building a business that would one day flourish. I grew financially independent, moving into a larger apartment filled with small personal touches, plants, paintings, books I had collected over the years. It was my sanctuary, my world shaped entirely by my own hands. By my mid-20s, my work had caught the attention of several major clients. My mentor guided me through negotiations, teaching me to value myself and my talents. I hired a small team, trained them carefully, and watched my ventures grow steadily. Each accomplishment added to my confidence, and the fear of being exposed to my family faded. The girl who once sat alone on the bleachers had transformed into a woman commanding her own empire, yet remaining unseen, like a shadow they couldn't track. Every night, before sleep, I would open my grandmother's notebook, now worn and filled with my scribbles of ideas, plans, and dreams. I often traced her words and smiled, imagining the day when my success would no longer be a secret, when the world would finally see the woman I had become. That day, I promised myself, would arrive on my own terms, and when it did, it would be unforgettable. The night of the college farewell arrived faster than I expected. The hall was buzzing with laughter, clinking glasses, and the soft hum of a live jazz band. Memories swirled around me like ghosts, the bright banners, the gleaming decorations, the familiar faces I had once known so well. For a moment, I felt a pang of nervousness, but it was quickly replaced by a calm determination. Tonight wasn't about nostalgia. It was about presence, power, and truth. As I entered, the room seemed unchanged, yet everything was different. People greeted each other warmly, unaware of the woman walking among them, someone who had once been underestimated, dismissed, and labeled invisible. I kept my gaze forward, my heels clicking deliberately on the polished floor. My designer dress hugged my silhouette with elegance, my hair pulled into a sleek bun, and my confidence radiating in a way that was quiet yet impossible to ignore. Then I saw them. My former classmates, the ones who had laughed at my ideas, whispered behind my back and said I would never amount to anything. My stomach tightened for a brief second, but I reminded myself this wasn't about fear. It was about acknowledgement. I moved toward the small group that had been particularly vocal about my supposed failure. They froze when I reached them. For a moment, the chatter of the hall seemed to fade, and all that existed was the subtle shift in energy between us. I let them take in my presence, my poise, the subtle sparkle of my bracelet, the carefully curated scent that was neither overpowering nor forgettable. I smiled softly, letting the tension linger just long enough for anticipation to build. "Hi," I said, my voice calm and clear. "You probably didn't expect to see me like this." One of them, a classmate who had been particularly cruel, stepped back, eyes widening. We didn't." I raised a hand, letting a small chuckle escape. "You didn't think I'd amount to anything, did you? That I'd stay the same girl you dismissed all those years ago?" I paused, letting the words sink in. "Well, look around." I gestured subtly to the room, my office space recreated here for the event, walls adorned with my artwork, a few awards gleaming under soft light, a subtle display of the projects I had spearheaded, and an understated showcase of the company I had built. Their expressions shifted from confusion to disbelief, some squinting as if seeing me clearly for the first time. It wasn't easy, I continued. Long nights, endless failures, moments when I wanted to give up. But I didn't. I worked, I learned, I grew, and I kept moving forward while everyone assumed I was invisible. My voice softened, yet carried a weight that could not be ignored. Then I revealed the numbers, not in arrogance, but as undeniable truth. I own my company. I manage a team of 50. Our revenue last quarter exceeded $4 million. Every project you ever laughed at, every idea you dismissed, I turned into something real, something lasting. The room went silent. One by one, their mouths opened and closed, searching for words. Eyes widened, jaws dropped. Someone whispered, almost inaudibly, "It wasn't her." I smiled, letting the statement hang in the air. Finally, the crowd understood. The girl they thought they knew had vanished years ago. The woman standing before them was unstoppable, unshakable, and very, very real. The silence in the room hung heavy for a moment, broken only by the soft hum of the jazz band in the background. I could see it in their eyes, the guilt, the shame, the realization of how completely they had misjudged me. And for the first time, I felt the full weight of my own power. This wasn't about revenge. It was about setting boundaries, claiming respect, and showing that growth came with responsibility. "I'm not here to humiliate you," I began, my voice calm but firm. "I'm here to be honest. I've worked hard to become the woman I am, and I've done it alone. But now that you see me, you need to understand something. Respect isn't automatic, it's earned. And I decide the terms." They shifted nervously, some leaning back as if to create distance between themselves and the woman they had underestimated for years. I looked at each of them, one by one. "You have choices. You can continue with the same patterns, or you can change. You can let resentment and judgment guide you, or you can pursue growth, honesty, and authenticity." I paused, letting the words sink in. Then I laid out my conditions. Each was simple, yet non-negotiable. Accountability, admit when you were wrong, and take responsibility for your actions. Excuses end here. Personal growth, commit to developing yourself professionally, emotionally, or creatively. Stop hiding behind envy or skepticism. Supportive actions, encourage others instead of tearing them down. Learn to celebrate success without fear or jealousy. Consistency, change isn't a one-time gesture. It's daily, intentional, and measurable. Some of them swallowed hard, their expressions shifting from disbelief to introspection. I could see the struggle in their eyes, the pull between old habits and the chance to grow. I didn't soften my tone. I didn't need to. This was my moment to show that strength could be gentle, yet unwavering. "I care," I added, letting a trace of warmth in my voice. "I care because I know the pain of being underestimated. I know how it feels to be dismissed. But care alone isn't enough. Action is. Change is the only way to prove that you've learned from the past, and that you can rise with integrity instead of dragging others down." One of them, the classmate who had shouted, "It wasn't her," at the farewell all those years ago, looked down, their fingers fidgeting nervously. I smiled slightly, seeing the flicker of understanding begin to take root. "It's not too late," I said softly. "You can choose to do better, starting now. But remember, my respect, my trust, my recognition, they come only when your actions match your words." For the first time, I felt the weight of the past lift, replaced by clarity. I wasn't just reclaiming my dignity. I was extending an opportunity for redemption, not as a favor, but on terms I set. Power wasn't about revenge. It was about setting conditions that reflected my growth, my standards, and my unwavering self-respect. Tonight, I had the upper hand, and I was not afraid to wield it. The days that followed were quiet, almost surreal. I noticed subtle changes in their behavior, hesitant apologies, thoughtful questions, attempts to engage in meaningful conversations. It was an instant transformation, of course. Change rarely is. But for the first time, I saw that my presence, my success, and the boundaries I had set were inspiring reflection. I walked through my apartment one evening, fingers brushing over the familiar leather notebook my grandmother had given me years ago. Its edges were worn, its pages filled with dreams, sketches, and reminders of a girl who once felt invisible. I smiled softly, thinking about how far I had come. The woman who had walked into that farewell was no longer defined by the judgment or laughter of others. She had shaped her own destiny, carved from persistence, courage, and quiet determination. I allowed myself a moment of vulnerability, reflecting on the pain, the solitude, and the doubts I had endured. Every sleepless night, every rejection, every sneer that once felt unbearable had been a stepping stone. I realized that empowerment wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about proving to yourself that you could rise, grow, and flourish on your own terms. As I prepared for my next meeting, a small smile tugged at the corner of my lips. I thought about the farewell, the gasp in the hall, the words that had once stung and now echoed as a memory of triumph. It wasn't her. Yes, it wasn't her, the timid, uncertain girl, but me. The woman standing here, fully alive, fully capable, fully free. I poured a cup of tea, inhaling the warm, soothing aroma, and placed my grandmother's notebook on the desk as a silent tribute to the wisdom that had guided me all these years. Growth, I realized, was not a destination, it was a journey, and I had traveled it with courage, integrity, and grace. The lessons were clear: compassion tempered with boundaries, power balanced with humility, and success shared without losing your soul. I felt a deep sense of closure, not just for myself, but for the people who had doubted me. They were learning, slowly, and I had given them the opportunity to see themselves in a new light, because I had chosen to rise, not retaliate. And so, as the city lights shimmered outside my window, I allowed myself a quiet moment of satisfaction and pride. I had become the woman I was always meant to be, and nothing could diminish that truth.